Rumors of a discovery hidden under the sands of Iraq have shaken even the most courageous archaeologists. Radar scans showed structures consistent with the heroic accounts of Gilgamesh's resting place, but no one is willing to shatter the seal. Why? Because it is said that what is inside will go against history, science, and even human comprehension. Is this the tomb of a king who was depicted as half man, half god? Or is it something even more dangerous? Tonight, we'll uncover why this mystery has left experts pale with fear. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel Spark Science, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. In the early 2000s, a discovery shook the archaeological world, though most of the details never made it past whispers, scattered reports, and hushed discussions among researchers. In 2003, a German team working close to the site of the ancient city of Uruk carried out a series of scans that would spark one of the longest-running enigmas of contemporary archaeology. Led by Dr. Jörg Fassbinder, the team used ground-penetrating radar and magnetometers in an attempt to discover traces of Sumerian civilization hidden beneath the sands of the desert. What they discovered was simply extraordinary. The tools uncovered forms, lines, and voids below the surface that hinted at something more than elementary geology. They hinted at architecture, corridors, chambers, and even vestiges of canal-like systems. To the surprise of the team, the features had a striking resemblance to passages documented in Mesopotamian writings, a massive complex connected to the resting place of Gilgamesh, the mythical king of Uruk. The scans indicated something enormous, about the same size as a football field, and the pattern mirrored the accounts of buildings near Gilgamesh's tomb. The Epic of Gilgamesh, mankind's oldest known surviving work of literature, tells us of his life, his pursuit of immortality, and in the end, his burial under the river. Historians for centuries believed that phrase to be poetic, not actual. But the radar returns indicated otherwise. The Sumerians wrote that Gilgamesh was buried under or near the Euphrates River itself, his grave covered by water and sediment. The Euphrates has changed course many times over thousands of years, carving out new routes and leaving old ones behind. The site in question just north of present-day Warqa, southern Iraq, was along one of these abandoned channels. In other words, it matched the ancient record in a way that was impossible to ignore. For the first time, there was real evidence that the king who had long been thought of more as legend than man might actually have had a tomb. If this continued to prove true, it would be one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in history, such as finding the resting place of King Tut or the unearthing of Troy. It would show that the man who was two-thirds god and one-third human was not just a myth but was, in fact, a historical king in some part of the actual world and left behind a resting place not unbefitting his heroic record. Yet even with the magnitude of the find, no excavation followed. The German team just delivered their data to the local Iraqi authorities, and that was how everything seemed to have vanished. The official reason for this was timing. 2003, the year Iraq went to war, and everything in the region made it impossible to conduct any further excavation work. After this, the country descended to chaos, and all the foreign teams beat a hasty retreat for their safety. But to the initiated, that was only half the story. It was enough reason to raise an eyebrow for anyone: no official report, no peer-reviewed article, no images made public. Why on earth was one of the most promising finds in contemporary history just left in limbo? Why was there no academic record other than interviews with Fassbinder himself? To cynics, the lack of openness hinted at something else going on: bureaucracy, secrecy, or even fear. In archaeology, findings are usually recorded, stored, and researched, even if excavation can't get underway right away. In this instance, all that was left were rumors and the team leader's initial words. With months giving way to years, speculation grew. Others proposed that Iraqi authorities, buried under the invasion and pillage of cultural institutions throughout the country, intentionally walled off the data to keep it from being lost. Others thought that the discovery was just too incendiary, too upsetting to the established historical narrative, to chance subjecting it to public scrutiny. If the tomb of a legendary king did indeed exist under Uruk, what else of the ancient Sumerian literature could be true as well? But rumors soon circulated that the site was left behind for more than fear alone. For as long as they have buried their dead, human beings have defended them, with stone, with silence, and occasionally with fear. In Mesopotamia, fear did so in a very particular guise. In contrast to the Egyptian pharaohs, who were commonly reported to lie under overt curses carved into their tomb walls, the Sumerians and Babylonians depended on protective rituals and incantations. These magical spells, written on clay tablets, called the gods upon to condemn anyone that would desecrate the eternal repose of a king. The condemnation was not intended to be swift or humane. It is described in these books that intruders could be subjected to disease, madness, or divine vengeance that would resonate far greater than one individual. For regular graves, these shields could have been limited. However, for a king such as Gilgamesh, half divine and half mortal, the defenses could have been much harsher. It was in this societal context that rumors of a curse over the Uruk find started taking shape. Shortly after the German expedition departed, tales circulated among the locals. Villagers and shepherds spoke of the desert that surrounded the alleged tomb having an unusual aura. Others claimed their livestock would not graze over certain spots. Sheep would flee, dogs would howl at night, and birds would shun flying over the terrain. These were not single occurrences, but instead repetitions that accumulated as told and retold over years. To the people nearby, it was an obvious warning: something under the sand was not supposed to be touched. Then there were the more disturbing rumors of individuals becoming suddenly ill after having had contact with the area. One such story, told secondhand among scientists, was about a small crew of workers who deployed some equipment close to the spot. Within a matter of days, they complained of intense nausea, high temperatures, and extreme dizziness. One man, the rumor had it, was dead within 2 weeks. Where these symptoms were derived from environmental factors, poisoned water, heat stroke, or infection, remained never explained. But to the natives, the answer was self-evident. They had intruded where they were forbidden. The notion of a curse was further strengthened when reports of inscriptions began to circulate. Other sources, never officially confirmed, reported cuneiform inscriptions on walls or artifacts associated with the site. These writings reportedly cautioned against eternal guardians, and a vessel not to be broken until the stars align again. This verbiage reads dramatic, even mythic, but it is paralleled in other Mesopotamian funeral writings. Priests and scribes tended to utilize celestial imagery to discuss the equilibrium among gods, men, and the hereafter. Even partial such exhortations from Gilgamesh's tomb would be enough to maintain in man fear and awe. Internet legends spread in an amplified form, and the idea of a curse on Gilgamesh's tomb completely gripped the imagination of the world. Articles and videos then started comparing with Tutankhamun's tomb in Egypt, with some attributing the so-called curse of the pharaoh to have brought sudden deaths among several, including Lord Carnarvon, who went into that room. Scientists later explained that the sudden deaths were likely caused by mold spores and bacteria. But legend power was not stopped. In the same vein, Gilgamesh's curse was not nurtured on evidence or something similar, but inexplicable events, weird folklore, and the inbuilt human tendency to fear the unknown. Even the most experienced researchers couldn't deny the potency of such legends. Archaeologists might not be candid enough to acknowledge that they do believe in curses, but they know how severe local folklores can get. Disregarding them might result in loss of cooperation, confidence, or perhaps even security. Places avoided by natives convey a message with substantial weight over mere superstition. It becomes a pragmatic reason to slow down, and at times, to stop entirely. And thus, the tomb of Gilgamesh was left undisturbed. Not because anyone was able to verify a curse existed, but because too many people felt it could. But even as this climate of terror intensified, there was another reason waiting in the wings. One which bore no relation to ghosts or spells, but a great deal to contemporary warfare. The timing couldn't have been more eerie. In early 2003, shortly before rumors of the Uruk scans made it into the mainstream archaeological world, the Iraq War exploded. The German expedition that had discovered the buried forms under Uruk's dunes had no choice but to shut down. Foreigners fled the nation for their safety, studies were stopped, and permits were cancelled. What could have been the start of a historic dig became instead the inauguration of one of the most long-lasting of history's enigmas. The scans were authentic, the information was available, but the opportunity to verify them dissipated overnight. While war was waging, the location disappeared from official documents, but not from people's memory. The void of information turned speedily into fertile ground for rumors. U.S. troops came to occupy parts of southern Iraq, and rumors spread that checkpoints were set up close to sites of archaeological value. To many, this was no accident.